Now, KMJ's Sunday Conversation with your host, Alexan Balakian. Sponsored by Gar Bennett. At Gar Bennett, we help growers feed the world.
Good Sunday morning, January 12th, 2025. And guess who's back on the powerful airwaves of KMJ? Yes, yours truly. I'm Alexan Balakian. Welcome into an all-new show that is somewhat familiar to those who used to watch me on KC24 every Sunday morning. We call this show Sunday Conversation, and appropriately so, because for the first time in a long time, and I won't ever say ever, because KMJ is older than some countries, both sides of the spectrum and everything in between will be on this unique platform. We broadcast on 105.9 FM and, of course, the mothership, 580 AM. Sunday Conversation, also available on podcasts at kmjnow.com and also on YouTube. Yes, we're always on TV. Watch Sunday Conversation on YouTube at KMJ Sunday Conversation. All right, much more on why I decided to come back to KMJ a little bit later in the show to host the Public Affairs Show. And it's not all about politics here, but then again, somehow we know politics always creeps into our daily lives, even when we try to ignore it all. Sunday Conversation is kitchen table issues straight to your eardrums. So now that we've done some housekeeping here, it's out of the way. So we're going to dive into our first guest on Sunday Conversation, and it's a lot of firsts here. He ran for office for the first time in his life. He won an election for the first time. He was sworn in for the first time this week, and he was on the dais for the first time this week. My first guest, Fresno City Councilman Nick Richardson. Nick, welcome to Sunday Conversation here on KMJ. How are you?
Doing well. Great to be here with you, brother.
All right, so you only hiked 15 miles on your first day on the job. I think we're all wondering, how many blisters do you have on your feet?
Luckily, every 3 miles or so, we'd stop and make sure we drink some water, change the socks. That's important. So due to that practice, I am luckily blister-free.
Oh, we are happy to hear that. You did something very new. First of all, no one ever walks to their job, but you did that. But you loaded your backpack with all of the tens of thousands of names in your district. Did you write them by hand, first of all?
Absolutely not.
Okay, it's because that would be a lot. That was how many names, roughly?
About 80,000.
80,000. All right. Is that all that you had in your backpack?
That's it. In the very bottom, I did have a tarp just to plan for inclement weather and a fresh set of socks. But outside of that, it was names. And honestly, once we had cut them all out and stuffed them in the backpack, it was about at capacity.
When you look at it, and you get to City Hall finally, which actually took what? How many hours?
5 hours and 50 minutes.
Wow. And you stop for bathroom breaks.
You got to take care of the crew behind you.
Yes, you did. How many people ended up walking with you?
There were about 25 people who came out. Some started and didn't finish. Some finished and didn't start. And then in different council districts, because we paid attention to stopping in the other districts on our way south. Some of the other council members actually came out and joined us as well, which was great to see. But overall, about 25 volunteers.
When you look back on the race that you ran, 22 months roughly, something like that.
Yeah.
Everybody is calling it the biggest surprise, the biggest November surprise, if you will, of the election. Some may say it's the biggest upset they've seen in Fresno City Council history. How would you phrase it?
Well, I don't think I'd use upset. I'm definitely not upset about it. But
well, you're not upset about it, but in a sports mentality, would you say it was a big upset?
I can understand why that would be the interpretation of some people, and it really depends on metrics, right? If you going forward with the sports metaphor, if you only gauge a football team on its offensive capacity, right, its ability to score points, that's fine. But how they're scoring the points, what the different facets of their offense are, how well they're able to adapt, if their special teams are scoring points, there are a lot of things that go into it, right? So if you're strictly looking at a campaign on the basis of money and endorsements, then yes, I could understand how this would definitely be an upset. At the end of the day, since walking was a cornerstone of our campaign, that's why we decided to do the walk on Inauguration Day. But really, the only thing that matters at the end of the day in any election is how many folks you can convince to fill in the bubble next to your name. That's it, right? And if you look at it on an outreach to constituents or on making a connection with actual voters basis, I don't think it was really an upset. That's something that we took to heart and we put a lot of effort in at the beginning, and I think the results were seen.
Your opponent, Roger Bonaktar, did he ever call you?
He hasn't yet.
He hasn't yet. Okay. Are you expecting his call? Will you take his call?
I always assume the best of people. I just assume that he's real busy, and I would absolutely take his call.
Okay. So you won the election by 990 votes. And Bonaktar had, you were talking about the metrics. He had all the big name endorsements. He had the big bucks backing his campaign. You ran a grassroots campaign. I know you won. Anything you would have done differently?
I am asked that pretty consistently. And I can't say that I probably would have replaced my tennis shoes earlier on in the campaign. But aside from that, I can't think of a single thing. We made 3 promises at the beginning. That 1, I was always going to show up to have a conversation with anyone who wanted to talk. 2, I was going to tell the truth at every opportunity and look people in the eyes when I do it. And number 3, I was going to outwork everyone around me. And we stayed true to that. And I wouldn't have changed my adherence to those 3 principles for anything.
I want to continue on your road to victory here because there was a lot that it entailed, including a big rift with the Fresno County GOP. Liz Kolstad was just reelected as chairwoman this week, or so we think. There's a lot of controversy there. That is still maybe somewhat in question for some folks. Maybe it's Peter Halagian. I don't know yet, and maybe that'll be worked out through the party itself. But what is your relationship, one, with Liz Kolstad at this point, and what's your relationship with the Fresno County GOP now?
I don't have a relationship with Liz Kolstad. We would definitely recognize each other at the grocery store, but we don't have a lot of interaction or a lot of things probably to talk about. My relationship with the county GOP is, I'd say, tangential at best. I know a lot of the folks in there, and there was, due to the endorsement processes and kind of just the way they've run shop over there, I've taken efforts to maintain some distance. And I also actually had this talk with my new staff today that during the campaign, there can be the time for politics to include political party affiliations and whatnot. But as soon as you're elected and as soon as you're sitting on the dais, you're there to represent everybody regardless of their party. So the politics can be during campaign time. This is time for government, and responsible government doesn't change a single value of mine. But what they're doing over there or failing to do or struggling to do is really back burner as far as I'm concerned.
Would you say you still see yourself representing a more conservative outlook on the dais?
My personal outlook, yes. I am a fiscal conservative. I've been a registered Republican for my entire adult life. That's my personal outlook, though. And there may be times when the residents of District 6 need something that I necessarily wouldn't see for myself, but my job isn't to work for me. My job is to work for them.
There was some controversy when it came to some of the ballots being mailed out in the district. Hundreds of ballots ended up in the wrong mailboxes. What level of concern do you have, I mean, even coming out on the winning side, do you have here of some of the inconsistencies and some of the practices that came out of this election, especially in your district?
There's plenty of pearl clutching every time there's an election about the validity of the election. And realistically, there are so many issues that I'm going to be able to tackle as a city councilman. But given the fact that our elections are run at the county level, I have faith that our county officials, who were necessarily perturbed by the result and by the time it took to count, I have faith that they're going to chase it down. There's no need or no use, I guess, in myself exercising that pearl clutching because it's outside of my jurisdiction, and there's nothing I can do except for raise alarm or raise panic amongst folks who also have not much to do with it.
A few of the council members, as you mentioned, did join your walk to City Hall. Tyler Maxwell, Nelson Esparza, Mike Carbasi. And I'm wondering from you, when we look back at who you're succeeding, which is Gary Bradfeld, now a Fresno County supervisor, he was much of a loner on the dais. He had that mentality. It was me against them. And, I'm going to call everybody out, and I'm going to be the transparent guy. And I'm going to call press conferences, and, I'm going to be the bombastic one and the loudmouth and that kind of thing. Although Gary can be kind of charming when he needed to be. How are you different? How are you going to treat this seat differently? Are you going to follow that model that Gary kind of had, or what is going to be your model when it comes to getting what you need done?
A couple things. One, Gary was approaching his 12th year in city council as a 12-year city councilman. It's a little audacious of me and probably misplaced if I go in there acting like I've been there for 12 years, because I haven't. Gary, as we know, was very passionate about a lot of things. And once you've seen how the system works for 12 years, you can go with that a little more passionately, I feel. Although there are things, yes, absolutely, that I want to do and I'm looking forward to it. I'm going in there with the tone of learning, right? I've kind of adopted a warrior monk kind of mentality in how I conducted the campaign. And I'm going to continue that. There probably will be a time to die on a hill, but that hill is not every hill for me. And that hill is definitely not going to be my first day in office. That being said, yeah, a lot of the city council members, they have been there for a while, and I'm going to be paying due respect to that and learning from them in the process. So if there are some of them that maybe ideologically I disagree with, but they take a good stance and they take a firm step in guiding me toward making responsible decisions, I'm absolutely going to value that. The mayor has been very instrumental and has reached out multiple times to make sure that I'm where I need to be. Other council members have taken strides to meet with me, congratulate me, show me the ropes. And I mean, I go back to high school with Tyler Maxwell. Councilmember Maxwell and I graduated a few seats down from each other from Buchanan High. So I'm looking forward to growing those relationships on the professional side. And again, keeping the politics out of it while still standing true to my beliefs, as I always have.
I expect you to whip out that yearbook picture on the dais, right?
That's a good idea.
You're welcome. You do say it's baby steps for you. You're in the learning process. That was part of the campaign strategy that Roger Benakdar had. He said, "Hey, I'm ready to work right away. I know how government operates. I know how business operates." His campaign said you were unqualified for the position. You won. You got the votes. Do you feel, because you do say that it's a learning curve for you, do you feel a little overwhelmed? And I'm not going to use the word unqualified, but do you feel overwhelmed? Do you feel like there's a lot to process in your first 100 days?
Well, there is a lot to process if you take the job seriously, absolutely. But just like when I was going through flight school, I mean, there are a lot of parts on a helicopter, and I had faith that my approach in studying and learning it and dedicating myself to that craft was going to get me to a point of mastery, and it did. I think it's a little naive for someone who hasn't been on the city council to assume that they have a level of mastery. So whether or not my opponent was an expert when he said it was, I don't know. I can't speak to that, but it'd be a little hard to believe. So there are absolutely things that I know how to do, can do, am willing to do, and have started doing that are going to start helping the residents of Fresno right away. Yes, I still have to learn, some of the intricacies in the third level of the hierarchy of the Public Utilities Department, but I think that's natural, right? And having someone who wants to learn those things and who's dedicated themselves to doing it and who kind of loves homework, I think that's important. That's what I would want in an elected leader.
First 100 days. Now you're headed to Africa, by the way. That was a planned trip.
That's correct.
Yeah. So you'll be back before the next city council meeting, I would assume. Right?
I will.
Yeah. And so my first thought is, what are you putting in the agenda that you want voted on? Maybe not immediately. It may need some work right away. But what do you want to put in the agenda that is going to garner a vote?
Putting in the agenda, I'm going to keep a couple things up the sleeve so far, just so as not to prematurely.
I don't want to break a Brown Act violation,
sure.
Because it's just you and me.
But I will also say, we started working on a lot of the things that we wanted to do prior to taking office. There are a lot of things you can do as a city council member. In fact, there are a lot of things you can do as a citizen that don't require 4 votes from the city council. Those things aren't going to take time to wait on. A lot of those things have to do with the developing relationship I have with a few different unions in getting discounted schooling for the children of our veterans and first responders in the city, to include childcare. A lot of those have to do with getting our homeless veterans off the streets. And in fact, there's some some upcoming news on that within the next week. That should be pretty exciting if it's not out already. There are a lot of things, whether it's small stuff like that or it's, nominally smaller things that are just getting out and following through with some of the promises that we've made to some folks who live up in the district. It's very easy when I came into this campaign and for a lot of candidates to say, well, these are my 3 priorities. These are the 3 things I'm getting done, and before they get in the job. But oftentimes those overarching ubiquitous problems like homelessness, public safety, small businesses writ large can be very easy to get you, easy to say to get you votes, but not really be actionable on day one. Things that are actionable are going out and standing in an undeveloped lot with the residents out there who don't want whatever's supposed to be developed. Things like that. Going and making your presence known with all the small businesses in the area to get their name out there and help them thrive.
Mindy Casto, she's been the interim police chief for some time now. Does she have your full support to become the police chief?
If she wants to become Fresno's next police chief, I would be excited to endorse her.
All right. And obviously we know you're not part of the hiring process, but you're on city council and she has your support.
Yes. If she wants the job, I would support her for the job.
First week on the job, what's the first thing you put in your office besides your nameplate?
The first thing I put in my office, as we've already started decorating it, is I've got there's a picture, a big graphic we had blown up of one of my best buddies from college OCS flight school who was killed in an aircraft crash, Tusk. And his picture with his aircraft will be going up on the wall, one of the first things that we put up in there.
Thank you for your service. You're ready to serve again. We appreciate your time. Congratulations.
Hey, good to be here, man.
All right. We'll be back with more Sunday Conversation right after this. Welcome back to Sunday Conversation. It's the part of the show where we get to be a little more unfiltered, if you will. Of course, this is still a family show, folks, and it's rated PG-13. And it's where we bring the seasoned professionals in the political arena. We want to remind folks this segment brought to you by my dear friends at the Pressbox Sports Grill. It's where I love to unwind. Pressbox Sports Grill, where the game's on, the food's great, and the drinks are always flowing. My next 2 guests, they love that part. Oh, yeah. I'm going to introduce our panel for the week. They both have quite the resume. We have the World Ag Expo Show chairwoman. Put that on your business card, would you? Former South Valley Congresswoman and also served in the California Assembly and in the Trump administration. Also, former Tulare County Supervisor, Connie Conway. Welcome, Connie. And her opponent, kidding, they're friends. Former Fresno County Supervisor, Fresno City Councilman, and he also served on the Fresno County Board of Education. He currently serves on the board for the California High-Speed Rail Authority, Henry Perea. Welcome both to Sunday Conversation. A little different, right? But we're having fun here. Let's start with the raging LA fires. It's, just unspeakable what we're seeing. It's hell on earth. It's the devil's work almost. 7,500 firefighters battling this 7 blazes now, multiple deaths, more than 200,000 people had to flee their homes. Economic loss projected somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 billion. Tens of thousands of acres of life and property in ruins. A political firestorm now brewing. Trump blaming Newsom. Newsom calling Trump a liar, saying climate change is to blame. Firefighters have no water in the hydrants to access, that according to multiple reports. LA Mayor Karen Bass seemingly lost in her first remarks, not even knowing the website where people can get help, saying you can go to some URL to get services. So, Henry, I want to start with you because, you've seen some crisis over time, and you're appointed by Newsom on the California High-Speed Rail Authority. We always know when these things happen, somebody wants to point a finger.
Of course.
It's not necessarily time to point a finger, but if we're looking for blame here, where should we look? Is it climate change, or is this simply not good policies now working against our friends in Southern California?
Well, it's a great question, and I think there has to be a lot of reflection after this is all said and done. Let's get to the premise of it. This is Mother Nature at work. and you can never predict when the next fire or when the next earthquake or whatever is going to come to a community. The question is, are you prepared for it as much as you possibly can? And there's a lot of firefighters that were on scene. My son is a firefighter in Manhattan Beach, and fortunately he didn't have to go. There were other crews that went, but I mean, you put a lot of people's lives in danger that when they go forward and put out these types of fires in communities. But I think there's going to be some work that has to be done. I know there's been talking about there wasn't water in the fire hydrants, and I know the narrative right now is, oh gosh, well, there was no water in the reservoirs because of the smelt. Honestly, I don't believe that to be true. I think I've known and been around municipal government enough where you sometimes have fire hydrants, and I would guarantee you in some parts of this town there may be fire hydrants that aren't active. You don't know it, but you don't know until you have to use them. So, I mean, there's just so much that you have to study. And I just know as a county supervisor, when we had some really horrific rains up in the Sierras, Shaver Lake, for example, I mean, the water overwhelmed the sewer and water systems there. And of course, could you say, well, gosh, people weren't prepared. Well, sometimes nature just overwhelms you no matter how prepared you are. So I'm not ready to cast blame on anybody quite yet, but I'm sure ready to do the analysis to see what actually did happen here, then hold people accountable, but more importantly, fix the system so they're better next time something happens.
Connie, obviously you served as Congresswoman during a special election. You filled in when Devin Nunes vacated his seat. I want to get your federal look into this, whether it be the water, most people saying it went out to the Pacific Ocean for a long time, and that could be a reason why there isn't water in the hydrants. Also, land management, right? That has been a big argument over time. Is it a state responsibility? Is it a federal responsibility? Is it a homeowner responsibility? Some would say it's a combination of all of those things. From where you sit, here in the KMJ studio, of course, how does your lens look into this?
It's in my way of thinking, first of all, it's so horrific. When you turn the TV on, it's like, am I looking at California? Am I looking at Los Angeles? Or am I looking at Ukraine? I mean, to me, it looks that devastating, some of the shots. I don't think that Los Angeles will ever be the same because it's been that devastating. But as far as policy and talking about the issues, whether it's federal, whether it's state, it's a California issue, and it is the perfect storm. Santa Ana winds happen all the time. We know that. I don't think that's climate change. They've always been there. It's as Henry's mentioned, are you prepared? Are you prepared for this? And it's easy to point fingers and to blame, but everybody's pointing at everybody else, and that's not helping the situation now, and it didn't prevent the situation before. As far as water goes, federal water issues, constantly fighting with California, with state. So you've got the feds and the states at odds a lot. I have hoped and prayed and wished that we could solve some of those problems. I'm not blaming the whole water system on what happened in LA, but it's certainly part of it. So will this horrible tragedy force people to say our water systems are inadequate? They're not doing what they need to do. They did when Governor Pat Brown developed all that, and how many years ago and how many millions of people ago was that? But the push, the back and forth between federal and state, it's kind of like, and Henry, we were both county supervisors. It's the push between the state and the counties. Yep. There's always pushback, and it's their fault. But until we find out, until we are able to do this deep analysis, for God's sake, people, let's try to fix what we can right now. Let's help the people that are there now. Stop blaming, start fixing.
A lot of criticism, Henry, I'll come back to you here. A lot of criticism against Newsom. He does an interview on CNN. Someone's home is burning in the background. There's been a lot of criticism that, hey, that's how somebody's learning that they've lost everything. And here's Newsom out there doing the interview there, where maybe his media team should say, hey, let's go into some kind of hub where we could do this. Not showing whose home is actually burning down at that moment, and that's how they're learning about it. Is that a little insensitive, or is that just, he's surveying the damage, he's surveying what's happening, and that's at that time, that's what happened.
I think, I'm not obviously going to speak for Newsom or his media team. I don't quite know how they managed their part of that operation, but yeah, I mean, I think whenever there's a disaster like that, you're going to find elected officials going to the scene, and they're going to be, speaking either to people that were affected or an area that was affected. I think it's just part of the optic. But yeah, you're always going to get both sides of that coin. Like, oh, they're being opportunistic in using that photo op. But tell you what, I'm more concerned and would like to know how and why these folks didn't have insurance for the past year, that they were dropped. I didn't know that until I was reading it today, and I was going, how can that be? How can you have a home and your insurance company dropped you a year ago and you're without insurance? I mean, I'd like to have the answer to that question, because that's
there's criminal. A lot of devious things going on, dubious things, I should say, going on with insurance companies and homeowners and that kind of thing.
All kinds of insurance in California. I was going to bring that up too.
Yeah.
That is going to be the real tragedy, because the people's house, people have lost their home, they've lost everything. But even people with insurance, there's no coverage. The insurance companies, they're leaving California. Some have left already. State Farm. People are searching, whether it's car insurance, home insurance, any kind of insurance. And how did that happen? What policies in the state of California are making insurance companies say, hey, we're not doing this anymore?
This may be the punctuation mark to the Newsom administration. Does this hurt him politically? Is he done because the perception, whether it's fact or not, we know how politics works, the perception is it's his fault? Well, is this Newsom's punctuation and dead end to his political career?
Well, I don't know if it's a dead end to his political career, but certainly he's the guy at the top, and this is his state, and this happened on his watch. So will he take a level of hits and be held with some responsibility for it? Of course he will be. How it affects him in the end and his political calculations of what's his next move, he's going to have to consider this as part of his legacy.
Connie, real quick.
I don't think it looks too good for him. I mean, I'm just seeing the complaints are not coming from, sure, part of it's political rhetoric, but it's not just the right side of the aisle. The left side, everybody is so upset about all of this. And there's a lot of explaining that needs to happen. And so far, the finger pointing, it's not saying, hey, it's my responsibility and I will fix it. I think that's what people want to hear, and that's not what I believe he's saying.
All right, we're not done yet. Guess what? We're just getting warmed up. Speaking of explanations, speaking of finger pointing, boy, when we come back here on the Sunday Conversation on KMJ, there's a lot of bickering about who really is the Fresno County GOP chair. We are going to hash it out next. All right, welcome back to Sunday Conversation here on KMJ. And we're back with our panel. Don't forget, our segment is brought to you by our friends at Pressbox Sports Grill. It's where we all love to unwind. Pressbox Sports Grill, where the game's on, the food's great, and the drinks are flowing. We're podcasting. We're on KMJ 105.9 FM, the Mothership 580 AM, and also right there on YouTube. If you guys are wondering, how did I switch my clothes during the commercial break? It's the magic of editing. All right, we're with Connie, Conway, Henry, Perea. All right, there is a lot of drama going on with the Fresno County GOP party. They had some sort of central committee vote in which the new chair would be elected. Liz Kolstad was looking for re-election. She says she won 15-14. There's Peter Halagian, who sent out a press release saying, well, we're co-chairs. I got a necessary vote at a Denny's at a different location. It's a lot of confusion. It's a lot of inside baseball. And Connie, I'm going to start with you because you're chair of the Tulare County GOP party. How is this all shaking out, and what kind of circus are we looking at here?
Well, I like to say politics is all drama all of the time. And while these folks on central committees are elected to the committee, they are not elected officials. Although elected officials participate, at least on the Republican side, on the committees, they can attend and have a vote. Most of them have an alternate they appoint that represents them and comes to the meeting and has their vote. Should the elected official come to the meeting and his alternate, they don't get 2 votes. There's only 1 vote per. So I'm familiar with the Tulare County bylaws. I am not as familiar with the Fresno bylaws.
Well, there was a couple of people, at least one person, that showed up 3 minutes late. This is according to conversations that I even had. And according to Liz Kolstad, the bylaws say if you don't show up on time, you don't get to vote. And somebody showed up 3 minutes late. Is that valid?
Well, I'm not familiar with Fresno's bylaws.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they say. And
would you do that for the Tulare County GOP party? If someone showed up 3 minutes late, important vote, chair vote.
We had our meeting last night, but everybody showed up on time. So
okay.
I didn't have that pressure.
Got it.
So as I understand it, it was a contested vote, and they took the vote however they did it. But then the group decided they didn't feel that the bylaws were followed. So they met again and voted again. And so now
do that?
As I read, I don't know.
Oh.
So now there's two elected bodies, both claiming victory.
Yeah.
I did ask someone today, what are these people going to do? Is the California GOP going to settle this? Is it going to involve a state party now? Are they going to say which one they're going to recognize? Because if there are 2 legitimately elected, that can't be. So someone's going to have to decide who it's going to be.
Right. Yeah. Henry, listen, you're a Democrat, and the local Democrats, they were throwing down some memes and they were trolling the Fresno County GOP on social media. I'm sure they're kind of cheering about this, right? They're poking fun at it.
Honestly, I don't know. To tell you the truth.
Come on, Henry. Come on.
We're not controversial.
When I saw this really is a situation that could happen in any central committee, Democrat or Republican. In this instance, I think Ms. Kolstad, probably, in my opinion, and she could be the Democratic Party I'm talking about. That, in my mind, that's an error to say, okay, you were 3 minutes late, and our bylaws say this, so sorry you can't vote. No, the person came, they took the time, let him in, let him vote. That's really, that would have avoided all this. I mean, there's always the spirit and the intent of the law, and I think in this case, she probably went beyond that. She should have just let them vote. What's wrong with letting people's voices be heard? And I know in history, there's been drama in the Democratic Central Committee. I mean, anytime you put people in a situation where there's an opportunity for some level of power or perceived power, you're going to see people behaving a little bit differently. And I think that's what we saw last night at that party meeting.
Grand scheme of things, we got about 30 seconds here. Does anybody care?
I don't think so.
I think it's bringing notoriety to central committees, because I think most people are saying, what's a central committee?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
what do they do?
It's a well-kept secret.
Does this start to hurt some local candidates who are definitely angry about it? Gary Bredefeld, not happy about it. Probably the new assembly member, David Tongipaw, is not happy about it. Is there representation now that they see this as a big problem?
I think if that's true, if there will be any impacts happening right after the election, and we aren't going to have another election for 2 years,
right,
and then another one 2 years after that, there's time to figure this out, fix this, and I don't think anybody's going to be worried about it by the next election.
I agree with Connie. They'll forget about it between now and the next election cycle.
I think I need to figure out a better way for you guys not to agree on everything. That's for the
we can
next
fight
show.
about something, I guess.
Henry Perea, Connie Conway, love to see you both. Thank you so much for being part of the first episode here of Sunday Conversation here on KMJ.
I'm honored. I'm honored to
No,
be
I'm
on
the
your
one that's
first show.
honest. I
Come
appreciate
on.
it.
It's great to be here.
They used to call us honorable, are we?
That's right. I don't know about that.
Still are. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, what tears us apart brings us closer together. I'll explain next. All right, welcome back to Sunday Conversation. I want to finish with this. 2025 is here for better or for worse. The City of Angels turned into hell on earth this week. The images are just really hard to wrap our heads around. You might have seen two neighbors. They tried to save their homes in the Pacific Palisades. They told the LA Times what I imagine hell would look like. Thousands had to leave their homes. The tourist hotspot of the Sunset Strip was reduced to ashes. And in a blink of an eye, ruins, a war zone, ashes. It's all there. Helplessness, emptiness, darkness. It could become the costliest wildfire in American history. It will also become a political firestorm, as it has already. And second, our nation also in mourning for the oldest living president, America's 39th president, Jimmy Carter, who passed away December 29th of 2024 at the age of 100. He served one term, but he and Rosalind had become an American symbol of family, faith, and goodwill. Jimmy and Rosalind Carter grew up together as neighbors and schoolmates in Plains, Georgia, went on to become the longest married couple in presidential history, 77 years. The secret, President Carter once said, to a happy marriage is taking the time to both, quote, share as much as we possibly can and giving each other permission to pursue separate interests. Here we are, just 12 days into the new year and already dealing with catastrophic, apocalyptic loss. In 8 days, President Trump will be sworn in as our 47th president. Promises have been made. The voters have spoken. The election certified Trump lover or Trump hater. Let's keep one thing in mind. The words posted by the former First Lady of California, Maria Shriver, on social media. She said, "We will rise and we're going to put our arms around one another." And how about the words once uttered by President Jimmy Carter? Togetherness is about sharing as much as we possibly can. That's all very much bipartisan. What divides us can bring us together. What tears us apart can bring us together. Unity under fire, in this case, literally. I know some may question the America First agenda, but as they say, all politics are local. So maybe it's time to put our arms around one another. Community First agenda. We are only stronger together, and that's why I wanted to bring back our voices together every Sunday morning. No bigger megaphone exists in this region than KMJ. A place close to my heart, and always will be. Many of you listening asked me to bring back these candid, heartfelt, and informational conversations, and so here we are, together again every Sunday morning. Much love to my sponsors, Gar Bennett. We help growers feed the world. And to the Pressbox Sports Grill, where the game's always on, the food's great, and the drinks are flowing, and the fun never stops. So that's our time, and we'll talk to you next Sunday.